All right, are you ready? All right, let's do it. So what we're going to be looking at is boundary types, okay? So different borders. There's a lot of different borders in the world, and we're going to look at how they can all be different, okay? So in the middle of that paper down at the bottom, we're going to start below, and then at the end of class, we'll go back up and fill out that chart that's at the top, okay? So in the middle, down below in all that white space, we're going to write out boundary types. And on the left side, we're going to write natural borders. Those are ones that are naturally occurring throughout the world. And on the right side, we're going to have artificial borders. Those are ones that people make, okay? What? Yeah, I'm going to record it for people who aren't here. Okay, so this is where we're going first. We're going to start with the natural borders over on the left side, okay, because those are kind of easier to understand. I think those are typically along physical features. So you're going to write what I'm going to write, okay? We're going to start with mountains first. If you want, you don't have to use different colors. I'm going to because it makes more sense to me. I like colors. I like to color code things. But if you don't want to, you don't have to. All right, I'm going to zoom in so you can see it better. All right, so with mountainous borders, a really good example of this is going to be between India. India is pretty much a triangle, and then there's a bunch of mountains right here, right? And then what country is to the north of India? Do you know?
Jordan.
This really big one?
China.
China, yep. This is China. This is India. And the mountain range, do you know what mountain range it is?
The Himalayas.
The Himalayas, yep. It's the Himalayas. So mountains can separate countries, they can separate regions from regions, they could separate states, they could even separate continents, right? Like we drew on our sketch map last week. What's a mountain range that separates continents that we drew last week? What? No, Europe and Asia, right? Which one separates Europe and Asia? Hannah, you looking at it?
You said Europe and Asia?
Yeah. The big mountain range. What is it, Ian? The Ural Mountains. Yeah, okay. So what I'm going to do over here is just draw my mountain ranges or my mountains over here. Okay. And to the east of it, it was Asia. And to the west of the mountain range, it was Europe, right? These are the Ural Mountains. That's a U. Okay. Okay, moving on. The next type of natural border is deserts. I'm going to use orange. Deserts. Oh, we're going to be doing 6 different types. You can write it around. So natural is going to have 3 different types, and artificial over on the right side is going to have 3 different types, okay? So try to make it fit. All right, so deserts is with 1 S, okay? Yeah, on the natural side, right? Because a desert is a naturally occurring thing. It's not something that people put, right? Because people can't just make a desert, okay? So a desert is a naturally occurring thing. And where's the biggest desert in the world?
The Sahara.
No, the Sahara. John was right, the Sahara. So draw Africa. That's my Africa. And here's my Sahara. Okay? That's the Sahara. So the Sahara is going to separate North Africa from Sub-Sahara. That's what we call South Africa, is Sub-Saharan Africa. Sub means beneath or below, right? Sub. So beneath the Sahara, Sub-Saharan Africa. Okay? So in North Africa, if you remember Unit 3 before we left for the break, we talked about different religions. Remember when we had that map and we drew the 5 different colored arrows all over it to show the spread of religion? What religion is in North Africa? Do you know? Islam. Yeah, Ian's right. Islam is in North Africa, okay? So the people of North Africa, like north of the Sahara, maybe a little bit living into the Sahara, is Islamic and Arabic people, okay? That's their culture, okay? But people in sub-Sahara Africa, so to the south of the Sahara, those are mostly like tribal groups, okay? When the Europeans went and broke up Africa and settled Africa, they tried to push Christianity there. So some of them are a little bit Christian, but there's just a lot of tribal regions down in sub-Saharan Africa, okay? Lots of tribal groups, lots of different ethnic groups or nations, right? If we're talking about our vocab, lots of different nations of people living in sub-Saharan Africa, okay? And so it's very different. The Sahara Desert is going to split the kind of difference of people there in the north and in the south. Okay, makes sense? Hannah called out another desert earlier. What did you say, Hannah? Gobi. The Gobi Desert that separates what?
China
and do you know what other country?
Kazakhstan.
Mongolia. Yep. So it's right along this border here. This is China. This one up here is Mongolia. And the desert is the Gobi Desert. Gobi, if you can't read that. Gobi Desert. Gobi. The Gobi Desert. So that's what's going to divide Mongolia and China, okay? That's a natural border there with that desert, okay? All right, that's it for our desert examples. My next color is going to be blue because we're doing what? What do you think? Water. Water boundaries. All right, so our easy one. Go ahead and try to draw the U.S. Try your best. Woo. And then to the south of us, we have... Meh, it's okay. It could be better. Oh, well. All right, so... we have what river that separates the U.S. and Mexico?
Nile? No, not the
The
Nile. That's
Nile.
Nile.
The Rio Grande. Yes, the Rio Grande, right? This is the river that separates the U.S. and Mexico, the Rio Grande.
Oh, I went to that one.
Okay.
Swim in it. It's nice.
All right, so that's the first one. It can even break up smaller things, right? Like maybe some of our states that we have in the U.S., right? In particular, our state. What is the river right to the north of us?
Red River?
The Red River separates Texas and my other favorite state.
Oklahoma?
Oklahoma.
The Mississippi River?
Okay. No, it's not the Mississippi River. What is it?
I mean, like, it separates Tennessee and
Yes. Okay, yes. The Mississippi River is another good example of that's a boundary, okay? But this river between Oklahoma and Texas is what again?
Red River.
The Red River. Okay. All right, and our last water example is what? We have rivers. What else can separate?
Lakes.
Great Lake.
Lakes, yes, and another option?
Oh yeah, Canada and Great Lakes separates Canada.
Yeah, you're right. Great Lakes do separate Canada and the U.S., but what's another water type that can separate?
Ocean.
Oceans, right? So, AKA islands.
Oh.
Australia. What is around Australia?
Water.
Mediterranean.
Yeah, water, right? Because it's an island. What oceans? Oceans.
Atlantic. Pacific.
And Pacific and what?
The Indian.
Yes, the Indian. Good job. The Indian Ocean is on the west coast. The Pacific Ocean is on the east coast, okay? Now I'm going to draw my waves so that way you know that this is all water, right, around Australia because it's an island. Okay? All right, that's it for natural borders, okay? So if I zoom out, that's what mine looks like so far, okay? All right, let's do artificial. So artificial just means that it's dealing with people with natural borders. Those are things that are naturally occurring in the world, right? People don't really have anything to do with rivers or mountains or deserts, right? But on the right-hand side with the artificial borders, it's usually dealing with people, okay? It's borders that people are going to put there for different reasons, okay? So we're going to look at 3 different types. The first type of artificial is going to be geometric. Is anyone taking geometry right now?
No.
Anyone, yes? Yeah, Ian? Okay.
Let's go back to see if we won.
All right, so geometric boundaries are pretty much just straight lines, okay? So if we draw U.S. and Canada, right? Don't we share a straight line a little bit? Ooh, that's bad. I'm going to try that again. Texas, Florida. There we go. And then Canada is way up here, right? So the line that separates the U.S. and Canada right here, anyone know what it is?
I have no idea.
The Yukon.
Anyone? It's called the 49th parallel.
It's called the 49th.
Well, let's think about it. Why would it be called the 49th parallel?
Because it's the 49th line on the map that's parallel to the
You're on the right track, yes. 49th line that's parallel to what?
the equator.
The equator, right? Think about how we draw our crossing lines on our sketch maps every time, right? We draw our red longitude and latitude lines, right? The 0 degrees across is the equator, and then the up and down the longitude line is the prime meridian at 0 degrees, right? So if we're talking about a parallel line, we're usually talking about the latitude line, and since we're talking about the 49th parallel, the U.S. and Canada is split along that 49 degrees north mark across. Okay, that separates to the north is Canada and to the south is the U.S., right? It goes right along that line until you get over to the Great Lakes. Okay, so that's where it's separated, all right? If we draw another picture, another example, it even goes down to states, okay? So draw a square. Wyoming, anyone know where Wyoming is?
It's above Colorado.
It is. Yes. Open up your maps, your atlases right now. I think there's some.
Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming.
It's further up a little bit. Isn't it?
No,
No, you're right. Colorado and then Wyoming's right above it. Look at page 40. It's the U.S. So there's lots of straight lines on our U.S. map on the left side of the map, right? Towards the west. Okay. Some of our states are truly squares, right? Wyoming, if you look at Wyoming, it's a square or a rectangle, okay? And the longitude lines, so longitude running long ways, both of those borders are along parallel lines, okay? So on the west side, this is 112 degrees west. And on the east side of Wyoming, this is 105 degrees west. Okay? This is a longitude line. Back to our US example, that's a latitude line. Okay? Go ahead and write that out so that way you know. Latitude is flatitude, right? So that is the US-Canada line. The longitude line is Wyoming. When we're talking about the up and down ones, those are longitude lines of 112 and 105. What? Yeah. Okay. Another example, an international example here. You can draw kind of like a square like this, cut it in half. To the north is North Korea. And on the southern part, it's South Korea. North and South Korea are split on right down the middle on the 38th parallel. All right, so a long time ago in the 50s, they were fighting the Korean War, okay? Communism versus the free world democracy, right? Free enterprise, okay? So they were fighting this war, and it never really came to an end. It was kind of just like a ceasefire, and what they decided to do was draw a line and split the Korean peninsula that sticks off of China up there, okay? It sticks off of there, it sticks out into the water, it's a peninsula. And so they just decided to kind of cut it in half. To the north would be North Korea, and it would be communist, and to the south it would be South Korea, and it would be free, okay? So they built this wall and this fence all the way across along the 38th parallel. It's known as the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. So you would think that it is not militarized, that there's nobody there, that it's just this blank land, and that's false. Okay, they actually both have their armies and soldiers on those lines because they don't want each other crossing. Okay, so it's kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? A lie. It's not really demilitarized because they have people there. There's a presence there. There's a fence. There's a border. There's a wall all the way across along the 38th parallel. Okay? And we'll get into that more in a few weeks when we do a lesson looking specifically at walls. Okay? So that's the 38th parallel. All right? So again, straight lines, right? That's geometric. Okay? The next type of artificial boundary is political, and I'm going to do purple for political. How am I going to fit this? I'm going to go political over here. So our political boundaries are the ones that you see on a map. So really, these are the borders that are determined by people, usually like the UN, right? Remember, we said that you have to be recognized by other countries to be a real country. And along with that, you kind of have to know where your borders are. So the UN is going to decide where the lines are drawn on a map. Okay, so really, this happened a lot in Africa. Draw Africa again. Ugh, gets worse every time. Okay, so Africa had a lot of different groups, right? What we're going to look at probably on Friday, because we won't have time to do it today, Africa had a lot of different groups. They still do have a lot of different ethnic groups, okay? But in the 1800s, Europe decided that they wanted all of the resources in Africa, okay? Because they had used all of their resources in Europe, or for the most part they had. And so they saw Africa and they saw the resources there, the diamonds, the minerals, everything that was there, okay? The raw materials. And so Africa, or Europe, all of the European countries got together in Berlin and they slapped down a map of Africa, and they basically just said, all right, European countries, draw the lines of Africa where you want where you want to lay claim in Africa. What part of Africa do you want? And let's draw it on the map and divide it up between all of our European countries, okay? Do you think that there were African tribal leaders present at this meeting? No, they weren't. They didn't have a say, okay? Europe just said, hey, we're big, we're powerful, we have a lot of money. Let's go ahead and take Africa because they're not very powerful, and let's use their resources. Okay, so they divided up Africa, and what ended up happening is that they just started drawing lines across Africa, about like that, okay? So again, that's not exactly the lines of Africa, but if you notice, in the country or in the continent of Africa, if you turn to page 63, there are a lot of straight lines in Africa because truly the European countries took a map and started just drawing lines, okay? Where could they get to? Where were the resources? And they just started drawing lines. They had no regard to where, what types of people were there. Remember, we just talked about how there are lots of nations in Africa, lots of different groups and ethnic groups and tribal groups, and they didn't care about that at all. The Europeans did not care. They just started dividing up the land. So they might have drawn a line exactly through the middle of an ethnic group, and they didn't care, okay? And so when they left, when they pulled out eventually in the 1900s, Europeans left, and they kind of left their lines there. That was a country, but wasn't really a country before. So now you have this land, take, let's say, Algeria, right? They have this land in Algeria that's a country now, but there's a whole bunch of different types of people living there who don't necessarily get along. So who's going to step up and be the ruler or the government, right? Do you think people get along easily there? No, we know that there's a lot of conflict in Africa, right? That's why a lot of them are LDC countries. Remember that from Unit 1? They're less developed countries because there's a lot of conflict there, because there's a lot of differences there, and they haven't really figured out a good system of how to get along with each other to figure out a stable government and stabilize their countries, okay? So there, Kylie, can you jump up and let him in? So the lines kind of are drawn like that, okay? Hey. What's up?
Can I film your class for broadcast?
Film my class? Like right now? I'm teaching,
Can you keep
yeah.
teaching while
Yeah, just come in and
Okay.
whatever. Okay, awkward. All right, one thing we need to write down is that this is an example of superimposed. Okay. So superimposed means that these are lines that are drawn over ethnic groups. Okay, so exactly what I was just talking about, right? Europeans didn't care who lived there before. They just started dividing up all of the land. So they made these lines over the existing groups that were already living there, okay? So that's really all that superimposed means, okay? So make sure you write that down. I know, it's making me nervous a little bit. It's like right in my face. Okay, okay, and the last one that we're going to do, I'm changing colors again. I'm going to do cultural. The last type of boundary is a cultural boundary. Oh, that's too big. You're making me so nervous. You are. Okay. Okay, I'm writing with my pen. Okay, so we are going to talk about how there are different cultures, right? A big one is India. India is basically a triangle, okay? And to the left, we have a rectangle. That's going to be Pakistan. And to the right, we have like a square, okay? So the triangle is India, label it. The left side is Pakistan, label it. And to the east of it is Bangladesh. Okay. Do I need to zoom in? Can you see it? You have Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. All right. So if we're talking about culture, think again about what we did in Unit 3. We talked about religion, language, and culture. Okay. So if we're thinking about religion, India is mostly what religion? Hindu, right? So India is Hindu. Do you know what Pakistan and Bangladesh are? Muslim, right? Okay. So they are Islamic. Okay, so again, let's think about colonialism. Great Britain is the one who set up a colony in India, okay? And whenever India wanted their own independence, eventually Great Britain pulled out of there and said, good luck, have fun, okay? So there was a lot of different types of people there, mostly Islamic people and Hindu people, okay? But they all lived in this same area, and all of this area was India. It was a British colony, okay? So there was a war that was fought. People kind of disagreed on who was going to go where. And eventually the Muslims separated into the west and the east over here. Okay. And so it was considered, Garrett, get out. Goodbye. Quit interrupting. See ya. Okay. So the Muslims separated into the east side and to the west side. And both the square and the rectangle over there, before it was Bangladesh, it was part of Pakistan. It was just split, okay? It was still Pakistan, but it was split. It was on both sides of India, okay? And eventually, Bangladesh made its own country, okay? But Bangladesh and Pakistan are heavily Islamic, okay? So they decided their cultural borders based on their religion, okay? So people who were Islamic moved to either like Bangladesh or Pakistan because that's where their people were, right? And people who were Hindu, if they might have been living in Pakistan, they kind of immigrated back to India because that's where their people were, right? Because people like to live next to people they are similar to, right? It's hard to go to a new place and be in a totally different culture, right? Whenever I moved to Austria, I was like a fish out of water. It was really hard to adjust, okay? So same thing here. We tend as humans to gravitate towards people that we are alike, okay? And so that is an example of a cultural border is with Pakistan and Bangladesh and India, okay? They kind of separated based off of religion there. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so that's it for the different colors. Grab your pencil because we're not done writing yet. I'm going to go back to my black because we have 3 main points that we need to write down below about natural and artificial, okay? All right, so let's start back with the natural borders. So these natural borders, these are logical, right? They make sense because they're along things that are naturally occurring in the world, the mountains, the rivers, the deserts, okay? They make sense because it's a natural separation. Okay, and because they're so naturally occurring, because you just find these things around the world, right? These are going to be less likely to change over time. You can't necessarily go and move a mountain, right? Or change a river. Because those are already there, right? Think about it. All these things have been here for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, right? So it's not really going to change that easily. You could have rivers that like change path a little bit, right? It might meander, but that's going to take a really long time. That's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a long time, okay? So these are borders that are pretty much going to stay set in stone for a really long time. Okay, at least during our lifetime, it's probably going to be the same, right? Because we're not really going to see a mountain move, sure, plate tectonics or whatever, but that's not going to happen in our lifetime, right? We will always see mountains exactly where they are and rivers exactly where they are, okay? So these are naturally occurring, okay? So put a box around it. are artificial borders. These are the ones that are kind of illogical. Okay, they don't always make sense, especially like when we look at Africa and our political borders, right? Those can be kind of tricky because we're dealing with people, right? People are the ones who are drawing those lines, and sometimes they don't make sense. It might make sense to one person, but to everyone else, it might be crazy, okay? So with that, these are going to be less likely to last over time. Because again, we're dealing with people. People could change over time, right? People might want to change their border type if it's not along a river, right? If only people decided it, and then all those people die, and maybe it makes sense to join this other country, or maybe a whole bunch of other people move into this certain area, and maybe now we'll extend our border to include that group of people, okay? That's going to be an example of an artificial boundary, right? Because people are the ones who are changing it. Okay, so the artificial boundaries are the ones who can change. And then the last one is that they can be redrawn. So like I just said, you can redraw those based on a whole bunch of, they can be redrawn. Does that make sense? If you just write redrawn, they can be redrawn. Okay, if you need to write can be, then do that. Okay, so again, not set in stone. People can change them based on whatever, okay? If people move in, if they have a war, right? Borders could change if we have a war, right? That would be an example of an artificial boundary, okay?